It's a funny one, isn't it? Population of this country, 60, 70 million, and the numbers of people or the constituencies, the cohorts of people that often dominate our thoughts and our discourse are almost always relatively tiny. But I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. It tracks tides, doesn't it? It tracks changes. I've been telling you for some time, this isn't an I told you so moment, I've been telling you for some time that net migration was set to plummet. In fact, it prompted some fairly abusive responses about 6 months ago. And indeed, I've already seen people claiming that they don't believe the current figures. So our friends on the far right of the UK media have very helpfully tried to turn it into a story about people leaving the country, British people leaving the country, a narrative that is not remotely supported by the statistics. But since when did these people care about statistics? And that, of course, means that you can now believe the figures because it's proof that everybody is running away from Rachel Reeves. I swear to you that I didn't know that the news bulletin there at 10 o'clock was going to contain the phrase illegal meat. I promise you I didn't. I'm not sure it's even a phrase I've ever heard before, because I had just resurrected the ghost of Project Fear. Do you remember Project Fear? When every expert in the country was queuing up to tell us what the impact of leaving the single market or the customs union would be, and every idiot in the country was queuing up to shout Project Fear at you. Actually, illegal meat was one of the things that Project Fear contained. So, of course, was insecurity across Europe, military insecurity across Europe, a sort of fracture of the old alliances caused by Brexit and alongside Russian misinformation. Funny how it's all happening. Still, at least we've got our pint bottles of champagne with which to console ourselves. You knew things were bad, didn't you, when they started pretending that was a genuine cause for celebration? Even though, again, anybody who knew anything about anything could have told you at the time it was never going to happen. No manufacturer is going to bother making pint bottles of champagne just so that Nadine Dorries can pop her cork. It was clearly nonsense, but by that moment in the cycle, we were reduced to pretending that it was, oh yes, that's worth it then. Oh, and was it crowns on pint glasses? We're going to put crowns back on pint glasses. So the thing that was going to make us richer, get rid of all the foreigners, turn us into the 19th century international powerhouse that we once were, without, of course, having the attendant consequences of slavery or the Industrial Revolution. All of that, oh, it's going to be amazing. And then within about 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, we were reduced to telling lies, in Jacob Rees-Mogg's case, about the signage on the Dartford Tunnel, pretending that having pint bottles of champagne would be the best thing since sliced bread, and putting crown marks back on pint glasses. So Project Fear is now unfolding, as some of us knew it would, hugely exacerbated, of course, by COVID, and that itself hugely exacerbated by the fact that we put a complete cretin in charge of our response to COVID and the crucial decision-making at that peculiar and unprecedented time in UK history, compounded as well, of course, by 12 years of austerity, by the absolutely appalling filleting of public services, which makes life worse for everybody except the extremely wealthy. Except the wealthy, really, but that constituency is now being nibbled at. People who would have been wealthy in 2010 probably not feeling wealthy today. And then you throw Liz Truss into the mix just for, clicks and giggles. All of which speaks to a really grim truth that I hate, actually. As a patriot, I hate what's been done to this country. I tell you every day. We're conscious, of course, that we can't serve up an unleavened diet of unhappiness and misery. We're not that kind of programme. We could serve up an unleavened diet of unhappiness and misery, blame it all on foreigners or Rachel Reeves, and we'll be home in time for tea. But we are peculiarly obsessed with facts, aren't we, during the 3 hours that we spend together? And I'm afraid the facts do speak to an increasing number of people, particularly young people, who just don't want to be here anymore. And I get it. I have, for the first time in my life, been contemplating the possibility of my daughters making their lives somewhere else. Happily, they will be able to do so in Ireland as a consequence of my ancestry and heritage. But I can't believe that. Even as the godfather of Remainers, the patron saint of centrist dads, the idea that I might actually not be horribly opposed to the idea of my daughters, should they so decide and should the dice fall accordingly, making their lives or making their first steps into the adult world. One of them's already studying overseas, but I think that would have happened regardless of domestic politics. But I get it. I was thinking about it myself. I think about where I might retire. I've always intended to split my time between North Norfolk and London's fashionable Soho. I might not be able to afford to do both, of course, now that the mansion tax has kicked in, but who knows? I've always wondered that. But then you sort of thought, well, you know, if we carry on going down this nativist rabbit hole, if we look at the disasters of the last few years and think to ourselves, well, let's give those idiots another go. Let's give Nigel a chance. Let's give the liars more opportunities to mess up all of our lives, then you would find it. And I hate this because I think it is a little bit unpatriotic. I hate this because it does sort of make you think, then, well, why? At what point does my bond with my country become frayed, even broken? And you look at young people, particularly 20 to 34-year-olds, and we're talking about the low, very, very low six figures. And one of the reasons why the coverage in the usual corners of the rancid, corrupt right-wing media is going in the direction that it's going is because you can do two things. You can turn a massive fall in net migration, which you've been demanding for 10 years, somehow into a negative. And you can pretend that the reason why young people, after 14 years of Tory rule, Brexit, Truss, Boris Johnson and austerity, are deciding at very short notice, within 18 months of Labour coming, or actually, because these figures go back, what are they, March to March, the figures? So Labour had barely been in power for 6 months, apparently, when people decided that they were going to leave the country. I mean, like I said, once lying is normal, once lying is commonplace, you can't really get it out of the public discourse without some fairly violent revolutions of thought and rhetoric. So that's what they're trying to argue today. 20 to 34-year-olds are started leaving the country in their droves within 6 months of Labour getting into power, and it had absolutely nothing to do with the mess that they inherited. This isn't even an opinion, is it, really? It's just counting. The idea that Rachel Reeves has done anything since coming into power that would make this country a less attractive place to stay in if you were in that particular age group, but frankly, if you were in any, is just absurd. But we find ourselves in this extraordinary peril, really, this extraordinary, what would you call it, like a pincer movement, in that the people who are trying to fix the mess inflicted on the country by the liars and the cheats, the charlatans and the racists, are going to be blamed for the mess that the country is in. We talked about this yesterday. I mean, it is inevitable. It's really important during our time together not to actually get dispirited to a point where you think there's no purpose in pointing it out. You have to keep pointing it out. You know, Michael Gove is going to be a judge on the Orwell Prize. That, to me, is dystopian in its absurdity. The people responsible for inflicting untold untruths and appalling impacts on a country, while the quieter voices were screaming from the sidelines about where this direction of traffic would lead, continue to be rewarded and lionised. I never get bored of pointing it out to you once I start pointing it out to you. Before I come on air some mornings, I think I'll change the record, mate. But you can't change the record. That's what patriotism looks like. When people are doing damage to your country, however dispiriting it may be, however repetitive it may seem, you have to keep pointing it out. Because they will lie and lie and lie again until we are in a sort of Trumpian nightmare, which isn't necessarily that far away. So, I mean, who could really tell a young person today not to up sticks? I know we've massively reduced the number of countries they can go to. I know that by voting to abolish our freedom of movement and being told by Priti Patel to celebrate that abolition, we have massively reduced. I suspect, well, there's an interesting thing. Because if we hadn't done Brexit, then there wouldn't be anywhere near as many reasons to leave the country. We wouldn't have lost £100 billion worth of trade. We wouldn't be seeing a doubling of illegal meat coming into the country. We wouldn't be seeing everything rendered immeasurably harder when it comes to getting goods in and out of these islands. So if we hadn't done Brexit, then the country would not be a place that so many are desperate to leave. But we'd still have freedom of movement. Isn't that the most perfect conundrum of modern Britain? So the thing that we did not only made everything worse, but it also made it harder to leave. But enough people are still finding ways to leave to merit the, or to give the people who told you, I can't do it. Yes, I can. I've just said why I have to. I have to keep doing it. The people who told you to vote to become the first population in history to impose economic sanctions on itself. People who told you Boris Johnson was a genius. The people who told you Liz Truss's budget was the best thing since sliced bread. The people who told you austerity was absolutely necessary and a brilliant idea, and David Cameron absolutely had the best interests of the country at heart. All of these people. Oh, look, some foreigners over there. Let's blame them. Oh, no, sorry, that was last week. This week we're blaming... Who are we blaming? People with big families. I got my statistics wrong yesterday. 60% of the families in the catchment area of benefiting from the abolition of the two-child benefit cap are from households where that are in work. It's 40% of everyone on universal credit. 60% of the households with more than two children who qualify for the benefit cap are households where one or both parents are in work. 60%. So it's not even half of the people claiming that benefit that fit the stereotype of being unemployed. So how would you do it? Because I hate this. I don't think I can. Here's a 25-year-old, possibly very qualified. Possibly they've worked really hard to be a medical professional, or maybe they've got no skills at all, or maybe they've got manual skills. Maybe they're brilliant joiners or electricians. And I have to do this. I don't really want to do this because it means that today everybody is in agreement. Nobody is confused as to why young people in particular want to leave this country. There will be arguments. The people responsible for turning the country into what it is today will be furiously, and of course they own almost all of the platforms, they own almost all of the loud hailers, they own almost all of the newspapers, they own almost all of the broadcasters, they own almost all of the professional contributors to public discourse, and they now own almost all of the social... Well, they do own all of social media, although... well, they just do. Even the Daily Mail is running an article today about how foreign grifters are flooding our social media with complete lies about race and criminality. The Daily Mail getting on its high horse about that kind of thing. So you know that the efforts to pretend that people who've run out of patience or people who are thinking of leaving the country are running away from Rachel Reeves or Keir Starmer are going to be by far the most dominant voices. As with all the other things in history, in the last 10 years of this country, the last, 15 years of this country, the story is exactly the same. It's why it's so important that some of us keep pointing it out. It's why it is exactly the same. The people who warned about what was on the horizon were proved right, and the people who called them deluded or proponents of Project Fear or, I don't know, cultural Marxists, are they still peddling that nonsense? So the people who've been proved right about everything were attacked by the people who've been proved wrong about everything, and the people who've been proved wrong about everything are still in charge of discourse, not of the government, which is why the people in charge of discourse are finally attacking the government. Things that they never did when all of the truly disastrous things were happening. Because, of course, you have to blame all the truly disastrous things on the current government, which is insane. Absolutely insane. John Major, Tory, Prime Minister, 100 billion quid. In a speech last week that nobody except us reported, as far as I can tell. Since when did we stop ignoring former Prime Ministers when they're making comments about the economic health of the entire country? So it's so weird this morning. Two things are weird. Number one, net migration has plummeted, and the people who've been demanding big falls in net migration for the last 10 years have somehow found something to be cross about. But number two, I think we can all agree, even as we argue about, it's a stupid argument, but you have to acknowledge it, even as people try to argue that 18 months of Labour trying to fix the mess is the reason why people are leaving the mess and not the 15 years or 14 years of government that created the mess. Hello? Nobody's really going to argue that the lure of emigration is louder than it's been in my adult life.